Welcome to Watch the Booker Man and a one-off video that's not part of any series particularly, but I'm going to be looking at the Cornell Verse in TEW 2016 and how it develops over those 4 years. I happened to have a save when I was looking through my old saves to maybe have a little bit of a final go on TEW 2016 yesterday. I found that I had a save that was in September 2019 with a small promotion that I'd set up that was kind of a offshoot of USPW. USPW had become the biggest company in the world, and I decided that I wanted Shane Snare, the former booker of the promotion, to start his own company and try and bring that old school wrestling style back. It was a fun game and a good roster. A lot of people came through the company. Jack Bruce probably the most notable, but the idea is just that I'm going to look through the CornellVerse in 2020 on my game, how it unfolded in those 4 years, compare it to how I expect it to unfold in TEW 2020, what I'd like to see maybe, because USPW is probably my favourite promotion. I booked them a lot in TEW 2013, but when TEW 2016 came around, they were the biggest promotion in the world from the start, and it sort of put me off. It took away some of the charm of them. It was only when looking back through this save that I realised that I've got a lot of interest in booking them in TEW 2020. Obviously, depending on how they go, they could have changed dramatically. It could have been a disaster, the takeover, the subscription-based content, etc. But the narratives that come up during the game, you'll see that one of them, the last one I think it is, refers to world domination, and that phrase is what really piqued my interest in booking them in TEW 2020. And just looking at the roster in this save, they're only at Cult. They've recently dropped down to that, I think, in December. They flip-flop between, I'd imagine they've done it quite a few times. They've certainly gone from national to Cult to national within the space of this year and back to Cult. But we see Aaron Andrews, who is the champion of TCW at the start of TEW 2016, but has been signed by USPW. He's not particularly been pushed that heavily, I don't think, by the company. He's only an upper mid. He's had quite a good run, actually. It's just that there's so many big names there, I suppose, that he's not yet on that main event level. But they've just re-signed Alicia Strong. She was my women's champion for 13 months. She just lost the title, and the day after my last event of 2019, they came in with the offer. They also took, I think it might have been, it was Canadian Golden Combat who took my world champion, so it was a very good time to end that save, really, because my roster was being torn apart. But as we look through the roster, it is quite an aging roster, as a lot of the big stars in the CornellVerse will be. That's why it's great to see that as the game has progressed, Cameron Vesey, Casey Valentine, I think he actually starts there in USPW, but like J Cord, Hollywood Brett Star, who I think in 2008 maybe, or maybe 2010, they were all in MAW and were a stable called the Succession. So it's great to see over the 10 years that I've been following the CornellVerse, maybe even more, to see the guys who are young and upstart rookies now developing into being the top stars in the business. And I expect that the likes of Brett Starr and J Cord, Valentine and Vesey will all be very, very big names in the CornellVerse 2020. When I look at the overness of the top stars in this game 4 years in, you will see that it is a lot of people, particularly, I've only really looked in the US, but the recognisable names in the US, you'll see that it's 33 for Aaron Andrews. He's obviously going to be a huge star for a long time. But Adam Matravers from 21CW is a big star, so potentially he works in the entire world, so maybe USPW will have come in and tried to steal some people from 21CW, and that is what, if they've not done it already, that is something that I'd like to do if I start a USPW save. The idea that the Reverie service is now available pretty much worldwide. It might not actually be throughout the entire world, but it's pretty much every region, certainly all of the English-speaking world. You can get access to USPW content, whether that means the company may change its product and become the Global Wrestling Corporation or something like that, or whether it'll still be USPW, still doing that 80s style of wrestling and be America's greatest export. They could go either way with it, but I'm pretty certain that they're going to be the biggest promotion in the world. But that is a great thing about the CornellVerse. Canada has got a national promotion, or it might just be Cult, but north of the border Pro Wrestling, who have gone out of business in this save, start off in a very strong position. Mexico have arguably the most respected promotion in the world. The UK has 21CW. There's even a big promotion out in Australia. So the entire game world is fleshed out and is a big TV company to be in pretty much every region. Europe, I think, is the only one without a company of that size. But like we see the big names, I don't know how Alex Braun's become such a big name, probably by commentating on SWF, but the big names generally looking at people in their 40s, so it is an interesting, actually when I look it's not that bad, but there's a lot of the major stars are getting up there in years, the iconic well-known names of the CornellVerse getting on in age, and I suppose it's reflective of in real life where when you think of the most recognisable names in wrestling, it's still The Undertaker, The Rock, Steve Austin, people like that, the younger generation aren't as widely known as those legendary figures, and that is reflected in the CornellVerse. How that plays out in the actual CornellVerse 2020, we'll have to see, but Champagne Lover is somebody who at 38 is going to be in the prime, maybe just after the prime, but he's somebody who I expect to maybe have moved on from south of the border. Potentially you won't have, but the idea of USPW signing him, potentially getting him to a multi-movie deal on the streaming network, and then having him as the figurehead of their promotion, I think would be a great move for them as they look to expand worldwide. He is the biggest star in the business, I think, at the start of the save. He's well known, particularly here, all over the world, and I think whoever ends up with him is, or if south of the border keep him, are going to be on very much the right path to being the biggest, strongest promotion in the world. He's obviously not interested in joining my small promotion, but if you look, $123,000 is what he's expecting, so it's going to take one of the huge promotions to come in for him to steal him away from south of the border. But in this save, he has every reason to want to restart his life, because his girlfriend cheated on him with that guy who is now, I think, in SWF. He was fired from south of the border, I think, pretty soon after this happened. Whether Champagne Lover would bring El Fuerza with him if he came to the US, that'd be an interesting move as well. But again, these legends like Christian Faith, who has left the business, Richard Eisen, he's very good friends with. He's somebody who is that tax thing in the game. There's so many stories. If you're not into the CornellVerse, I'd just recommend reading biographies and looking through the history of the CornellVerse, because there is so much to it. Like I said, it's 16 years old now, something like that, and there's just going to be new talent in there, and it does feel a little bit like a new generation, that a lot of the old heads who were big stars are now very, very old. It was like I was looking through who you could bring in from Canada for USPW, and a lot of the big stars there, Steve DeColt, I think is 46 by the start of the save. The Stone family are all getting up on in age. Jack DeColt too is getting up in age, and Alex DeColt, I'm pretty sure the storyline in TEW 2016 is that he's pretty much slowly losing his mind. So I think that if you are booking USPW to expand the roster, I think Ricky DeColt would probably be your best option of somebody stealing from there. He's a main eventer in CGC, and this time I don't think he's that over. He's barely got any overness in the United States, but he is talented enough that he would quickly get up there. He's just very over in Canada, so again, he's going to cost you a lot for what he's worth. But he's been building up muscle mass in the time between, I think it was 2011 to 2013. So maybe by the time that we're in 2020, he's bigger than that. Maybe he's a light heavyweight. That is generally the size that the DeColts are. So he's always been the smaller one, but he's somebody who I'd be very, very interested in signing. Let's have a look over at Australia now. I think the biggest stars in Australia will be with Raw still, but a lot of them, 21CW seems to have a lot of spillover, but somebody like Captain Wrestling 2, he's got all the skills to be a very, very big name. I think he's got, he's charisma 93, his star quality 92. So he's somebody else who maybe has moved on, or maybe he's the guy that makes Raw one of the biggest promotions in the world. Obviously, it's a very big promotion already, but largely TV based. Sweet McCarthy is developed certainly in this save to be absolutely brilliant in the ring, but he's always been brilliant on the mic. 100 star quality. He would probably be the top of anybody's list to try, and if any of the big stars from Raw or Australia are coming over to the US, I think Sweet McCarthy would be that. He's only 31 at the start of 2020, which when you look at how good he is there, you've got probably 10 years of him being one of the best workers on the game. He's 4th in the Power 500 and will be absolutely invaluable to any roster. That might be an interesting thing to look at who the Power 500 is and see how this compares. Ashima is at Burning Hammer after PGHW went out of business. He was one of the iconic figures of that promotion, but it went out of business during the course of this save, and he's joined pretty much their biggest rivals in the company. But if you look at those skills there, he's an absolutely brilliant worker in ring, and his psychology. 44 years old, so there is signs there that it's a little bit skewed towards older wrestlers. El Leon just coming into his prime. I think that's the top championship in south of the border, because Champagne Lover's out for 10 months, so somebody else is going to have to do that. But there's so many good wrestlers, developed so well. Nicky Champion, I really hope he's still in USPW, because he is Mr. USPW. He's the future Sam Strong type figure, the biggest star, and I think he will be an iconic figure by the start of TEW 2020. It's actually showing me that some of the big stars aren't actually that old in here, so it's not something to worry about. I mean, Sweet McCarthy, like I said, only 31 years old by 2020, 35 years old. He's unemployed. I don't know why that is. That's quite strange. He went freelance, but has he been signed by anybody? Has he had any matches this year or anything? Oh, so it's fairly recently that PGHW went out of business, but he didn't work for 7 months of the year and he's still up there, so he's somebody who's obviously very, very talented. Off chance that he'll join my... Oh, he only works in Japan. Not a chance anyway. He's far too good for us. Angry Gilmore. So there's a very deep talent pool. We'll look at the company of the year was Burning Hammer, Sweet McCarthy and Luke Steele. Very, very good tag team in Raw. Nikki Champion versus Champagne Lover. That's a match that I hopefully will be able to book for USPW in 2020. I really hope Nikki Champion's not gone south of the border in the default database, but we will have to see about that. So it's a really interesting database as mine has developed naturally as it does throughout the course of the game. I think USPW are definitely, to me, the most interesting promotion in the CornellVerse. They've gone from being a small sort of family-friendly based promotion with Danny Gillespie setting them up in 2001, and they've grown sort of year on year. Will they have grown even bigger in this one? We don't know. Obviously, there's the potential that Richard Eisen could be involved in that scandal. He's got the FBI stuff, and he's a bit of a dodgy figure, so there's a chance that SWF has been further weakened, and USPW have been able to capitalise on that. I'm expecting maybe that Alicia Strong may leave the company, her influence going down after her father left the company, and maybe she's been the catalyst for TCW or SWF to start their own women's promotion. But here there's an excellent roster for them. They've sort of had the pick of the bunch. They've taken anybody who they wanted. Nikki Champion is obviously a huge loss for them, but they've still got Rick Law. They've still got Rich Money, I think. No, Rich Money's gone as well. And recently, very, very recently, he might still be on the roster. No, Steve Frelly left the company as well. So it's probably a bit of a bad time for him. They've just gone down to Cult, but I kind of want to take him over and carry on this save. But obviously, with TEW 2020 around the corner, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. They've signed Jack Bruce, who, again, he's somebody who had a very, very interesting story in this save. He was involved in a scandal back in 2016 and was fired. I signed him to a few appearance deal in 2017, and that apparently was enough to reconcile his image, and he was signed in April 2018. Will a big star in the CornellVerse have had a scandal of their own? There's so many questions, and I really, really can't wait to see how the entire game world has developed. 21CW I expect to be bigger than ever, and the feature, pretty much of any feature in the game that I'm most interested in seeing play out is the development companies. We can now play as child promotions. I'm expecting USPW might have their own. If not, I'd be starting one straight away. 21CW, it's a pretty barren landscape in Britain. There's only Scottish national promotions, and their owner is constantly getting newsletters, news items on the website for being a scumbag and an awful guy. So I don't see them having much growth. They might continue in their little niche in Scotland, but hopefully there's some challenge to 21CW. Maybe Dunton Hall, who I know has been sort of inactive in the database for some time now, or maybe they just have set up their own, like NXT was kind of the alternative to WWE in reality. Maybe 21CW will have set up their own development that is kind of the alternative for the fans who don't necessarily want the sports entertainment style on that we'll see on sort of mainstream television in the UK in the CornellVerse. That could potentially be something that develops there. I think SWF will maybe have severed ties with Rhode Island Pro Wrestling, or maybe repackaged them, rebranded them. I've always had the idea of SWF having a Hawaiian development. I think that's because their dojo is based in Hawaii, but SWF is a company who are in an interesting position because for the first time in TEW 2016, they weren't the biggest promotion in the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if Richard Eisen is no longer in charge of the company. Like I've said, maybe he's caught up in that scandal, or maybe he's just old and retiring. It says he's aging there in the biography, so potentially he's passing on the company to Jerry Eisen. I wouldn't be surprised if Jerry is now the owner and maybe Eric Eisen is booking himself very, very strongly. Rocky Golden's ended up in SWF, so if they end up with somebody like that, they're going to have no problem in resurging their roster. They had Rich Money, Steve Frelly and somebody else taken from them, and throughout the course of this save that I've had, they've had a lot of their big stars. It's a very, very different roster to what we see. Wolf Hawkins, Rocky Golden, Remo is obviously with the company at the start, but Zimmy Bumfall and Frederic Antonio Garcia, these are the top names in the company, so it's not looking like that strong of a roster for them. They've brought in some strange people, I think, really. Nate Johnson is not somebody I expected to see in the SWF, but they, I think, will be going through a bit of a identity crisis maybe, and perhaps are trying to modernise themselves by having a new development and maybe having launched the SWF network to counter Reverie and their global domination plans. I'm quite centric around the United States scene, but that is what I know best in the CornellVerse. I've been in Canada as well and booked in the UK, but the US is always, I think, going to be the key region in the game. MAW have been a company that I've played quite a lot, but they pretty much every save that I remember doing long term, they go out of business. In, I'd say, the story of the CornellVerse, they're quite a self-sustaining promotion. Sam Keith taking over from Ripcord in great hands, and hopefully they're still a part in TEW 2020 because the conveyor belt of talent they bring through is really good, and I really enjoy signing unemployed people and seeing them move on to a bigger promotion and then starting the process again. It's a very interesting save where you're not necessarily going to be the biggest promotion in the world, but there's a sense of growth and a sense of following the people who have moved on to bigger and better things. And the challenge, like it says in the game, that I think, what's he called? I can't remember his name, but he apparently looks like a sprout. Or is that just, I don't know if that's actually, let's see if sprout's written in his, no, what's he called? He's really, really quite rubbish. But the idea was that the people in charge of MAW were sort of getting cocky that they could turn anybody into a star. So really, finding people who aren't that talented, or somebody who just has maybe one good attribute to them, it's an interesting challenge, and I really do enjoy playing as them. I will find this guy's name as soon as I see it. Keith Vegas. I don't know where I got the sprout thing from. Keith Vegas, what a name. Yeah, he just has a terrible. I suppose he does look a bit like a sprout, and he's a decent wrestler actually. Performance ratings of B-, so it is proof that with the right training anybody can get where they need to be. North of the border are gone in this. That's why I set up a Canadian promotion. It's got the other logo, but Canadian promotion, and pretty much every big name you wanted was available. Dwan Stone, Steve Ducott. I've got a tiny roster because I had to let a lot of people go because financially it wasn't very viable to have those really, really expensive wrestlers. I fired Mark Dubois as well because he came back from hiatus and was still on drugs. But yeah, it's a bit of a ramble. Really looking forward to the TEW 2020 CornellVerse. Hopefully North of the Border Pro Wrestling is still around and has found a way to replace those aging stars that it's got. I'm a big fan of the House of Stone. The talent that's sort of churned out over the years is really impressive. Acid, Alex Robinson, Art Reed, Bobby Tom. In fact, I'd probably go through the profiles of all these people because that is a lot of very, very big talent in the CornellVerse, and I think they were the first promotion that I got into via the Stone family, and I think they offer like an interesting gateway, was for me anyway. Bruce the Giant and Marek Koklov as well were really interesting. Koklov might be somebody who is in USPW as well by the start of save, although he's 44 at this time. He's always been limited, he always will be limited, but I suppose he can fulfill a role. But I'm interested to see who maybe in this save hasn't got that popular, somebody who's talented but maybe not that well known, and whether they've been picked up in the CornellVerse and turned into a big name, a regional star. We might have some really good in-ring workers who've sort of nothing has came of them. But with mods probably not going to be coming for weeks or months or whatever, I think it's a really interesting... he's got 92 psychology and is still an opener. I think that is something that will have changed in 2020. Apparently the way rosters work and how people build themselves up to the upper echelons of the promotion has been changed, so that's a good thing. But yeah, like I was saying, with mods probably not out for quite a while, I think I'd recommend the CornellVerse wholeheartedly. I think it takes a little bit to get into because there's about 2,000, I think, maybe more workers in there, and it's hard to get in. It's hard to start at the deep end because if you just take over SWF and there's 50 people you don't know, it can be difficult. So maybe go with like an MAW, who I've said a tiny promotion, and your goal there is to just improve workers and make them better, or start with, I think 21 CW would be an interesting one, but they've got a massive roster here, so maybe not. Maybe start your own promotion. That's something that I think will get you into the game as well. I just started a new promotion and picked them off the pictures really. Whippy the Clown, I remember booking I think Grease, Hog and Leadbelly. This was when they were unemployed, so it must have been like 2013, 2015, I'm not sure. 2015 weren't even a game, 2016. When did they leave the SWF? Yeah, so that might have even been TW 2010 when I brought them in. But yeah, there's so many colourful, interesting characters, and just the best way to get into it is probably just by going off the pictures and coming up with your own characters. And the more that you book, the more that you'll see people leaving the SWF and USPW, and you'll know they've got some level of talent at least, or something potentially, even if it's just overness to give to the rest of your roster. There's a steady array of fresh talent coming through, which is another great thing, that it's not just a case of when you get a year in, you're only getting like regens through. You do get new characters, and David Stone, I don't know if he'll have debuted yet. He'll be very close to debut. Well, he's debuted in this, so he will have debuted. For years and years and years, there'll be new talent coming through. And I do think the CornellVerse is the best way to experience the new features and things like that, because obviously the database is pre-set up to incorporate pretty much everything. Very much looking forward to TEW 2020, but in particular, I cannot wait to see how the Cornell Verse has shaped up over the last 4 years and how it compares to that one in my save that I've showed you.